Welcome back, guys. Hope you're doing great. It's Victory here. So in our previous video, we learned use effect, use context, suspend, Redux toolkit, React query, and suspense and lazy loading, all these stuffs briefly. So if you haven't watched that video, so click the link in the description below, or you can see the on the top right corner, click it so you can watch that, all those React hooks and everything. And today we are going to learn the most important React hooks that every developer must know to write clean, performant, and professional React code. Basically, in React, hooks are not just an APIs, they represent how you think about the state and its performance and its architecture. Right? So in this video, we will understand four essential React hooks, why they exist and when to use them. And finally, we build a professional component using all of them together. Right, so we are going to start it from the beginner examples and at the end, and we are going to build one professional component with all the hooks together. So what are the hooks that we are going to learn today? So we are going to learn use reference. So let me close all these things, close others. We are going to talk about these hooks. These are the hooks that we are going to learn about: use reference, use memo, and the use reducer. Okay, use memo, callback, reducer. These are the hooks that we are going to talk about today. Okay, so in this thing, the very first one, which is going to be the use reference. So basically we are going to learn about what is use reference. So use reference means it is not a state. You need to keep it in mind. Use reference hook, it's not a state. Use reference is used to store a mutable value that does not trigger a re-render when it changes. Right, that's the important stuff that you need to understand. Okay, so use reference is used to store a mutable value that does not trigger a re-render when it changes. Okay, so there are two main uses for using this. First one, it helps us to access the DOM elements. Okay, it helps us to access the DOM elements. Then it helps us to store the mutable values like the previous state, like a timers, like a flag values. So these are the things, the two main cases over here. So why the use reference exists? Why we need it? That's the first question we need to. If it is not a state, then why I need it? So React state causes re-renders, right? Of course, state causes the re-renders. So some values need to be persisted, but should not be update the UI, right? At that point, we use the use references. So, and one more thing, it gives us the direct DOM access, right? Because sometimes we require it. These are the cases. To resolve these issues, we use the use reference hook. And the second one, situations when I need to use the use reference hook. In order to access your DOM elements like inputs for focus or for scrolling or your DOM window listeners, at that point we use the use references. Then storing the previous value, as I said. Then for the timers, intervals, flag values, all these things, at this point we need to use the use reference hooks. And we should not use it for the state, UI state. We never use the use reference hook. So now let's talk about the example, right? For a beginner to understand what is the use reference. Okay, let's go with the beginner example itself, and let me make the text a little bit bigger so you can see it clearly. All right, so a little bit, let me reduce, it'll make this one bit so you can see it completely. Perfect. So now what I have to do is here I'm going to create a use reference code. So let's say const input reference, which equals to use reference hook. Use the use reference hook, make sure that is being imported properly, and initially the use reference hook needs to be null, which means this is going to represent the null value. Then inside this div, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an input as a text. Then I'm going to say placeholder, enter some value, enter some value. And here we are going to supply the reference. We're going to create a reference. So map that reference over here, input reference. Okay. Then right after here, I'm just going to say button, and which is the type of button itself, button. Then I'm going to say focus input. That's a basic thing. When I click this, I need to focus this one. Okay, so on this on click, I'm gonna call a callback function. Then I'm going to use that input reference. use the input reference, then access the current instance which is mapped with that reference element, right? Which is this is the one. Okay, so let's do the console log so you can understand. So console.log that input reference dot current value. If I click the inspect elements and get into the console, close it, and let me make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. Okay, now if I click this focus input, you can see it's printing that entire DOM element. So that's the current instance reference. Current instance reference is nothing but that input reference where we particularly map that reference. So that's the thing. So currently this input reference is mapped here, so it is printing, it's get printed. So now instead of console logging it, I just need to focus this particular input tag. So I'm just going to say input reference dot current. I need to focus it. So use the focus function to focus it. Okay, so save it. And now if I click it, you can see it is being focused, right? If let me show you one more time, click outside and click it, it is being focused now. So that's the beauty of using the use reference hook. Okay, so let me explain one more time. So we are using this use reference, right? That creates an object. Basically, it's create an object called current. What does it create? It creates an object called current, and particularly is going to be null, right? So that's the reason we are using input reference dot current. Okay, then React assigns the DOM node to this particular current. That is what happening. So this node, it's been assigned to this current instance. So it makes sure that no re-renders happens whenever you're trying to access this node by using that input reference. So let's talk about the differentiations between the use reference and the use state. So that's the one important thing that you need to understand. So because most of them make mistakes at that point only. So use reference and the use state. So use reference doesn't create any re-renders, but use states causes the re-render, because if the state changes, component needs to re-render. Then use reference is always mutable, you can change it, but it's mutable, and use state is immutable. Okay, so and use reference, it's only used for the DOM and its values, and the use state, it's only used for the UI state. Okay, that's the thing. All right, so this is all about the use reference hook. So if you have any questions on the use reference hook, please point the timeline and post your questions in the comment section. I'm happy to help you out. All right, so now let's move on to the use memo hook. Okay, so we need to understand what is the use memo hook. The use memo hook basically just for me, by the term memo itself, we can understand it's just used for the memorization. Use memo hook memorize the calculated value, so React doesn't recompute it on every render. Okay, think about it. If you are working on a cart, you have multiple items. Each items can have a different price and different quantity. We need to calculate the price with the quantity for every particular item, and you need to calculate the grand total and subtotal as well. As that's the tedious task. So at that point, for every render, if you are trying to recalculate those stuff again and again, it's gonna cause an performance issue. So at that situation, we use this to memorize the that calculated value, so I don't have to recompute it every time if there is no changes in that value which I have. So that's the beauty of using the use memo hook. So use memo hook catches the result of the calculation, so it is not recomputed on every rendered. Okay, so why the use memo hook exists? So React states re-renders frequently, right? So the expensive calculations might slow down the UI rendering. So some values depends only on the specific inputs. So at that point, recomputing the every tedious calculations, it's gonna cause you the performance issue. So overcome it, we use this use memo hook. So when to use? Only on heavy calculations, filtering the large data list, and derived values used on multiple times. Okay, so don't use the use memo hook for simple calculations, it's not necessary. All right, so now let's talk about the beginner examples over here. So we have this, right? Particularly we have this And what I'm going to do is here from the React, I'm going to get the use memo hook and as well as the use state, both of them. Okay, so now use state, I think it's not necessary. Let's keep it in that way. Use memo hook. So here I'm just going to say const expensive calculations is equals to an arrow function, and this function is basically going to receive the parameter as the number, object as number. So const result is equals to use memo hook, open it, and this is going to get an arrow function, open it, and at the end you need to supply the array injection just like the use effect itself. No changes at all. Now inside this use memo hook, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say console.log calculating, console.log calculating, something like this. Then I'm going to say return that number, okay, multiply it with some series number of values, something like this. I think that would be perfect. And this needs to be re-rendered only if there is any changes on the number. If not, don't change it. Okay, so and right after that, yep, so this is the syntax. Basically this is the syntax. This is how we use and calculate and store the expensive calculations. So now let's talk about some real world real case scenarios. Like, so I'm just going to close this stuff, close it, right? So I'm going to bring myself some sample data over here for the products. Like, I do have a list of array of objects. This is how in a real case scenarios you do have. So think about it that you want to calculate some like the filtering. Let's do some filtering over here. Okay, so what we want to do is a search. Let's try the search filter. Like most common real cases we use that. Okay, so what I have to do is I just need to refilter it every time whenever someone types some input, right? So what we usually do, so we just do something like this: filter products is equals to something like products dot filter. We use the filter method, then we'll access every single item out of it, then we'll get the item dot name first, then we need to convert it into a lowercase, right? Then after that we need to make sure if it is includes that particular search term which we don't have yet, right? This is how we used to search every single time, right? This is what we used to search, right? But this filter runs on every re-renders, right? That is going to cause us the performance issue. Right now we have only 4 objects, so it doesn't make any sense. But when in real cases you might have more than thousands of records, so at that point it's going to cause you a series of issue, right? So this is not applicable over there. So that's the place where we need to use the use memo hook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the use state hook. Let's bring the search, and by default it is going to be empty string. Then right after here what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the filter method. So I'm just going to say const filter products is equals to filter, that would be make sense, okay, filtered. Okay, then right after here I'm going to use the use memo hook, which is going to take 2 different parameters. One is going to be the function and another one is going to be array dependency injections. If there is any changes on the state of the search, or if there is any changes on the products, I need to recalculate it and I need to get the computed value in the memorized value, right? Otherwise I don't have to do that. So I'm just going to say console.log here filtering products, something like this. Then right after here at the return, you need to return by filtering the data. So return products dot filter method. We are going to do the same stuff, but we are going to put it inside the use memo hook. Then I'm going to get the item out of it, accessing the item dot name, then converting it to a lowercase, not to a lower case, convert it into a lower case, then I need to make sure that includes the text which is inside the search. So convert the search also into a lowercase. Okay, so that is going to calculate and put the filtered product in your hand. Now let's use this same input reference itself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to here on change I'm going to access the event, and I'm going to set that event to the search. Get the search and access it e dot target dot value. Get that value from it and put it inside the search input like this search e dot target dot search value. Now right after here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say filtered products dot map, open it, and let's get the item out of it. Then I need to render it, right? So I'm going to bring a paragraph tag with the key. Basically it's going to be item.id itself. Then let's render the item.name. Okay, so now if I save these changes, you should be able to see that you do have iPhone, Samsung and everything. Now if I type something over here, let's say if I search for Mac, the M, it's trying to figure it out whether that particular character contains in the search character inside the item name, right? MD is not there, but when you're typing something, see, it's literally doing the stuff, filtering everything. So this is the most complicated stuff, right? When you're working with a really big bunch of data. So that's the point we use the debouncing effect. So every time when I press, it needs to wait for milliseconds, then it needs to trigger the API. Otherwise, it's going to cost us, the API cost will be hit skyrocketed. Okay, so there are lots of stuff that we need to discuss, but I hope you get the point, like what's the purpose of the useMemo hook. All right, so this is all about the useMemo hook. Like without useMemo, the calculations runs on every re-renders, right? Every render, it's going to run that useMemo calculations just like the usual way which we use to calculate. And with the help of the useMemo hook, it runs only when there is a number changes it's happening, like the text changes if it is happening, if the product changes if it's happening, then only it is going to run it. Otherwise it's not going to trigger it, right? So when you should not use the useMemo hook, you should not use the useMemo hook for very small calculations or for the premature optimizations. You should not use it. All right, so now let's go for the third one, which is going to be your use callback hook, right? So just like the useMemo hook, this use callback hook is also used to memorize something, but useMemo hook memorize the calculated value, but here the use callback hook memorize the function reference, not the result. It's going to only memorize the function reference, not your function result. So it's used to preventing it from being recreated on every render, just like the way we use the useMemo hook to prevent re-rendered or recomputed on every render of your UI. We use this use callback hook for the memorizing the function reference, for preventing it from recreated on every render. Okay, so why the use callback hook exists? Think about it. Every render, if a function is keep on getting created again and again, it's going to create a memory leak. So we use the use callback hooks for the functions, or like functions are recreated on every render. To avoid it, we use the use callback hook. So this causes unnecessary, if you don't use it, it causes unnecessary re-renders in child components. So it is important when you're passing callbacks as a props, right? So the use callback hook is really important. If you're passing that callback reference functions as a props to a child component, it's going to cause an unnecessary re-renders. To overcome that, we use the use callback hook. So when to use the use callback hook? When you're passing a functions to a memorized component. So every handlers, event handlers, not every event handlers in it needs to be used as a use callback hook, because for the performance critical aspects. So if you're more concerned about your performance, make sure every event handlers as a use callback hook, unless if there is any changes that needs to be recreated, then it will be preserved. Okay, so And most importantly, don't use it for every function. Only if it is necessary, use it. Otherwise, don't use it. Even if you're using it for everything, it's going to cause the performance issue. All right. So now let's talk about some like real cases, scenarios for use callback hook. Okay. So here we have these products and all those things, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself some internal components. So I'm just going to comment all these things, right? And right over here. Okay. So over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself some internal components. So let's say, um, internal component. Okay, let's keep it. Let's create a product item. So I'm just going to say product item, which is going to be right. So basically this product item is going to get the complete product. It's going to collect the complete product. Then at the end, it's going to return this no need of using these things. Okay, so save it. This is just the product stuff that we want to use, and let's make sure that is working. So what I'm going to do is comment all these stuffs, not this one. Instead of using this paragraph tag, I'm gonna bring this product item. Then I'm gonna supply the key, which is going to be item.id. Then I need to supply the complete product itself, which is going to be your item. So save it. You should be able to see that same item stuff over there, which is perfect, right? So now right after here, what I'm going to do is, or here, so basically we are going to keep a function. So let me show you the differentiations. What happens if I don't have the use callback and what happens if I do have the use callback. So here I'm just going to keep a normal function, which is going to be const handle add to cart, something like this, add to cart. And we are going to get the complete product information over here. We will get the complete product information. Then here I'm just going to say console.log added, something like that. Added, we added that particular product dot name. We added that product into the cart, just for understanding. Okay. So now what happens is, so we need to pass this function. We need to pass this function as a reference over here, right? So what I'm going to do is, for this, I'm going to have a function called on add, something like this. That's a prop. And over here, I'm just going to use that function on click. I'm going to simply add that, get that function. Then on add, I'm going to send that product to that function. Okay, so basically this function is just a reference for this function, which means if anything happening over here, it is going to trigger this function, and this is going to re-render unnecessarily if you're not using the use callback hook. Okay, so I'm going to pass this over here. So on add, we are passing this handle add to cart as a reference. Save it. Okay, so now if I click this, if I click any name, you should be able to see added Samsung TV. And if you click MacBook, so basically it looks like it's working fine. But what happening here over here is, since we are passing this function as a reference to this child component, every time whenever the child component re-renders, it is going to recreate the same functions again and again and again, right? So that's the new handle add to cart function, which is recreated every time whenever I'm clicking, right? So the product items, it's re-renders unnecessarily. All right, that causes the performance issue. So that's the place where we use the use callback hook. So we're gonna cut this out. Let us delete that stuff, and let's use the use callback hook. Open it, and inside this hook, we're gonna have a callback function. Okay, then of course we're gonna have the array dependency injections as well. As keep it empty if you're not going to use it. Then inside over here, inside this, I'm gonna get that product as the function parameter. Then I'm just going to say console.log added what particular product name is being added, product.name. Save it. This is also going to give you the same approach. Let me show you. If I click this, still the both of the output is going to same. But why? The same function reference, even if your child is happening re-rendering, if it is happening, still we are using the same functional reference over here. So the child can be optimized. We can make sure that it's been optimized when you're using the react.memo, right? So the combination of useCallback and react.memo will hit it's a most favorite stuff. Okay, so the component needs to be, this component needs to be memorized. So that's the place where we use the react.memo to memorize your entire child component. If there is nothing is changing, if you're simply supplying the value, rendering it, then keep rendering it. Unless or until if there is no changes in it, we need to keep that component also be preserved, and that function also needs to be preserved. So at that point we use the react.memo, right? So what I have to do is just cut this out from here to here, then use this react. We need to import this react as well as we have the react, so we are going to use the react.memo. Use the memo. This is to memorize your entire component. Okay, open the callback function, paste it, paste the component code over here. Till you will get the same stuff, right? All these things is just for what? For your performance only. You can't visually you can't see the changes, but at the background it will increase the performance. Okay, so without use callback, memo is useless. This memo, if you're not using use callback over here, there it is over here, then this memo is useless. But with use callback, the memorization will works and the code performance will get optimized. All right, so this is all about the use callback hook. I hope you understand, but still you might have a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of questions. And yeah, so basically when you're working with the real case scenarios in a real project, and that point only you can see the performance, how fast it has been doing that action compared to if you're not using the use callback and use memo. And okay, but the overall concept is this, right? If you have any questions, please leave it in the comment section below, right? So now let's move on to the next one, which is going to be your useReducer, the one last one, the finally one. So useReducer is the alternative to the use state. useReducer is the alternative for the use state for complex state logic. Okay, so that's the situation where we use the useReducer. Okay, so basically it's a hook for managing complex or structured data or a structured state logic using for actions and for the reducers. Okay, so why we need to use reducers? So use states becomes messy when you're working with multiple updates, right? Of course, think about it in a single state value. If you're doing a lots and lots of complicated actions, the single state it get more messier. So complex transitions need some predictability. So that's why we use the useReducer hook. So we use the same pattern in the Redux toolkit, which we already discussed in the previous sections. Okay. So then when I need to use, since we know that it is the alternative for the state, so when I need to use this, so if you're having a multiple actions related to the same state value, use the useReducer. And more for complex update logics. You're doing complex logic calculations with the same state value, go for it. And if you need a very predictable state transitions, then go for it. Don't use for simple counted logics. Don't use for simple toggle actions. That's not necessary. Okay. So now let's talk about some example over here for understanding this. How does it is going to work and everything. All right. So yep. Just one more point. Instead of taking it as an alternative for a state, think of it like a local redux, right? A local redux to do some complex actions, right? So like a centralized logic in a single place, something like that. So we have some sample data over here, but this data doesn't have the quantity in it. So let's get the quantity for each and everything. add the comma and paste the quantity over here. Now we have some quantity stuffs over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this stuff. I think let's clean it. Okay, let me clean it. I don't need that stuff anymore because we already discussed all those things and everything. So let me keep it clean. It's not necessary for having all those stuffs. Okay. So right after here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself a state, right? So let's create a state, use state products, set products, which is going to be our product system. Let's keep it as data products, or because everything is going to be same name, that is also going to be a miss here. Get that data and put it in the local state for the products. Now we have the product states in our hand, right? So if I'm simply using the use state for complex calculations, for increasing the quantity and for decreasing the quantity, what I will do, I'll just create a function called increase quantity, which is equals to going to be an arrow function. And here what I will do, I will get the ID of that specific product, and then I'm just going to say set products, update that products by incrementing the quantity. So products dot map, from that I'm going to access the single product out of it. Then I'm going to identify that product by using the p.id should be equals to the ID which I'm supplying in it. If it is equals to, then I need to preserve all the values which is already in that particular product. So destructure that product. Then I need to update one specific value which is going to be the quantity, right? In that, which is going to be access the p dot quantity, whatever the quantity it is, I need to increment the value in it. Then if it is not there, I just need to return the complete product itself. See what exactly we are doing. If the user clicks the increase quantity button, at that point we are going to set the products by updated value by using the map function. With the help of the map function, I'm going to render every single extract every single product from it. Then we are trying to figure it out if that ID which I tried, if I supplied into that function, if that ID, if it is equals to the product ID, then we will isolate that particular product alone. Then if both of them same, I'm going to create a new object by destructuring all the previous value which I do have in that product. Then I'm just going to update the quantity, replacing the quantity with the product quantity plus 1. If that ID is not matches, simply return the product. So this is the tedious task. So let's do the same thing with the decrement. If I was trying to decrease the quantity, I will do the same stuff over here as -1, right? So this is the tedious task, right? This is the real pain point over here. So the issues over here is, what's the real issue is repeated logic, right? And it's really hard to scale it up, and we don't have the no clear action intent over here. Debugging over here, it's really messy. It's really messy, guys, when you're trying to debug over here. So this is the place where we use the useReducer to keep it clean and simple action stuff, right? So let's leave this part over here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to say const cart reducer. We're going to create ourselves a new, and that is going to get this function, then an action. It's going to get the state and the action, two different things. Okay, inside here I'm going to use the switch case, use the switch, and here I'm going to supply the action dot type, what kind of action it is being triggered. As I already said, it's just the local redux, so it's quite exactly the same logic. Open it. Then here it's going to be case increment. If it is a case increment underscore quantity, then we are going to do some stuff. What we are going to do, we are going to return with state, whatever the state I do have, state dot map function. Open it, isolate the single item out of it, item. Then we are going to make sure that item dot id should be equals to the action dot payload, which is the ID itself. If it is say so, then we have to do the same stuff what we did over here. Instead of p, use the item, because that's the item value which we are getting it from the map function. So item, save it. This is the single action, right? This is the single action. I'm going to copy this, then I'm going to paste it. If it is case decrement quantity, instead of this, I'm gonna keep it as plus for increment, minus for the decrement. Okay, if I want to remove case remove underscore item, if that's the action type, then I just need to say return state dot filter. We just use the filter method. Then I'm going to access the item out of it. Then I just need to make sure that item dot id should not be equals to action dot payload. Okay, by that way we can remove that item. Then by default I'm just going to return the state. That's it. This is all about the this is all about the cart reducers which we have in our hand. All right, so now how I can use this? Okay, so what I'm going to do is right after here I'm going to create const is equals to, I'm going to get the useReducer. Basically useReducer, it's going to give you the array of values which is going to be your that state value, that is the cart, and the action functions, these functions to trigger these action functions, which is going to be, let's keep it as the dispatch itself. That's the name that we are trying to give it for that. Then useReducer, I need to supply the cart reducer which I have created. Then I need to supply the initial values which we do have in our state, which is the products itself. Okay, so now we have that cart and the dispatch. Then what I have to do is basically we are going to render the multiple items with their names and its quantity, and we are going to give it a button to do some actions with it. So right after here I'm just going to say cart dot map, use the map function, open it, get the item, then we have to render it. So let's create a div, empty div, then let's apply the key which is going to be item.id itself. Inside over here I'm going to bring an h3 tag which is going to render the item.name. Then I'm going to have a paragraph tag which is going to display the quantity. Let's keep it as qty. Then item.qty. Right, then right after here now you should able to see we have the iPhone, Samsung along with this quantity. Right, then I'm going to bring myself a button. Let's keep it as a single division, and I'm going to bring it a button colon button. Over here I'm gonna have an on click actions. Let's keep it as plus, bring one more stuff, that is going to be minus. Okay, otherwise let's bring this quantity and put it in between over here. That would make sense. Okay, we have the plus and minus sign for each and every product. So for this let's use the style attribute. We can make it a little bit flex, which is going to be display it as flex, and a gap which is going to be 20 pixels. Now that's how it looks like. Okay, that would be perfectly fine. Okay, so now whenever I'm clicking this button, I'm just going to say on click. When I click this, I'm going to have a callback function. Then I'm going to trigger that dispatch, open it. I'm going to send an object, two different object, one which is going to be the type, get the type object. So basically the type which is going to be this increment type, increment quantity, because that is what we are trying to do with the plus one. Then I need to send the payload, because inside we are receiving the payload, action.payload. So the payload which is going to be the id, which is going to be the item.id itself. Right, so let me clear this. Let's copy this and paste this stuff over here as well. As instead of increment in quantity, I'm just going to keep it as the decrement quantity for this. Save it. Now every time whenever I click this plus sign, it is going to increase that particular quantity, and if I click the x minus sign, it is going to decrease that quantity. We have to do the same stuff for removing as well as. So I'm going to copy this and paste it over here, and I'm going to keep the X mark. This time this is going to be the remove item, paste it, and the payload, which is still, it's going to be the item.id itself. Now you will have the X mark as well as. So I'm going to increase the quantity, it's working, decrease, it's working. Oops, when I click this, why it's removing the quantity? That doesn't make any sense. Oh my goodness, I changed the name over there. That's the reason it was doing that stuff. Okay, so instead of remove item, I need to paste that remove item over here, not there, because I paste the remove item for the minus button. So that's the reason it's not working. So now the increment is working, decrement is working, and when I click this, it is completely removed from that. So that's how we use the same state, but we use the complex logic actions with the same state. We use the useReducer for it. More or less, useReducer is quite exactly the same as your Redux, but that is the Redux toolkit for a global state. useReducer is for your local state. That's the important stuff. Okay, so we finally discussed all the use reducers, use reference hook, use memo hook, and use callback with simple data with some real case scenarios examples. So if you have any questions in this, you have to drop your questions along with the timeline, what you don't understand, and if I explain anything in a wrong way, please point out in the question in the comment section, and I'm happy to review it, and I'm happy to correct myself, and I will give you the proper answers as well as. Okay, so yeah, this is it. I'll see you in the next video with the more interesting content. All right, take care.